One of your most asked questions is how do you set exposure when shooting in manual mode? Meaning like, should you start with shutter speed first, ISO, or aperture? In this video, I'm gonna walk you through a simple framework that I like to use to get there.
My name is Pi. I've been fortunate to create multiple successful companies in the photography space. I'm a photographer, but even more so, I would say I'm an educator and frameworks person. My specialty? Making complex subjects easy for you to master, right here on Adorama TV.
What's up, friends? Welcome to Adorama TV. My name is Pi. If you guys know me, you know I like to get straight into things. So look, let's break this down. When you're dialing exposure in manual mode, how do you go through the right process or the right order? First, I would say there's not really a right order so long as you get to where you want to go. But I do have a simple framework to help each of you in getting there a little bit easier, maybe a little bit quicker as well. When you're looking at the exposure triangle, you have your shutter speed, your aperture, your ISO. Of course, you already know that each of these controls the overall exposure, or that I would say is the technical side of each of these function, right? But they also have an artistic side. And within this framework, it's pretty simple. All I want you to do is to think of the artistic side first. But what do I mean exactly? If we go to shutter speed first, shutter speed is going to control, of course, the brightness of the image by controlling how long the sensor is exposed to light. So the faster the shutter speed, the less light gets in. Slower the shutter speed, the more light. But the artistic side of shutter speed is the fact of whether we want to capture or show motion. If we want to show motion in a shot, we're going to use slower shutter speeds. If we want to freeze motion in a shot, then we would use higher shutter speeds. Same thing goes for aperture. The technical side of aperture is that, well, it's the iris of the lens, so you close that thing down to higher numbers like f7, f11, and you're going to allow less light into the lens, right? You open it up, f2, f1.4, you allow more light into the lens. But the artistic side is your depth of field. A wider aperture is going to give you less depth or create more of that background blur or bokeh in the shot, and a closed down aperture will create more depth. You're going to see more of the background detail. ISO is the exact same. Yes, of course, you know that raising ISO is going to raise the overall exposure, right? And in low light, that's fantastic, but there is an artistic component to that too. The higher the ISO, the less quality in terms of overall color, overall detail. You're going to start introducing grain, color grain, all of that. So it's a sacrifice. As you go up in ISO, you're losing color information and overall image detail. That's the artistic side. Now, whenever you approach a scene like this one, I want you to think from the artistic side, not from the exposure side. Let me show you how that works. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sabrina. Come on in. We will link her up so you guys can give her a follow. She, at the time of posting this video, will probably be in Hawaii doing Hamilton. So yeah, that'll be cool. You guys can check it out too. Why don't you have a seat right here? And I'm going to walk you through what I'm thinking from a compositional standpoint. What I love about this is that at this time of day, we have the sun kind of coming through between these buildings, and it's creating this nice highlight behind her where if we drop down, we can place her right into that highlight. We know that the eyes are naturally drawn to the brightest area of a frame, right? So I'm placing her basically in the brightest area of the frame, and I'm gonna have everything kind of leading into her. We'll get some nice depth in this scene as well. So when I'm thinking of exposure, use any camera you want, any lens you want. I've got the Canon R5 with a 28-70 on it. What I'm gonna do is think first of artistically the most significant setting. And what I would say in this scene is it's probably aperture. Not only does this background have a lot just kind of going on naturally, but also have all these signs, this explore sign, the bench, the other signpost. I want to knock all that stuff out. So from an artistic standpoint, I'm going to start with aperture, and I'm going to open it all the way up to f2 on this lens. That's the max it can go, so I can blur that stuff out and create focus on my subject. Okay, so at f2, I start to get some of that blur. We create some separation between the background. That looks great. The next thing I would look at is shutter speed. Do I want to freeze or capture motion? I mean, here, she's not really moving. I do want to freeze motion because I want it to be just a nice portrait of her. But because she's not moving, 1/250th of a second is going to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and set the shutter speed to 1/250th. And at that point, my ISO is currently at 100 ISO, but I would note that it's a little bit too bright. So I have a couple options. If you have low ISO, then you can go ahead and just drop down to low ISO, or I might just increase my shutter speed to 1/500th, and looking at my histogram, I'm just gonna make sure that the highlights are kind of the only piece that are peaking. My shadows are all retained and everything's good. From there, let's take the shot. One thing artistically that I want to point out as well is that I'm tucking the camera into her shadow. So notice that if I'm up here, the sun kind of pops out and it creates a flare, which you can use artistically by all means, but I'm gonna pop into the shadow to kind of create this natural highlight right behind her. Now when setting that exposure, I'm using the histogram. What I'm trying to do is I'm kind of making sure that I'm keeping all the shadows in the image because I don't want those shadows to be muddy. I'm letting the camera pick up as much of the highlights as it can. So we kind of see this bump of a histogram where most of the details to the left, we have a little kind of peak off to the right side as well. And with that, I'm gonna take the shot. I love the results. This is straight out of camera. Here's what it looks like edited. When you approach that scene, think number one, what is the most artistically significant setting here? If it's aperture, start there. If it's shutter speed because you need to show or control motion, start there. From there, move to number two, which is gonna be the second most significant piece. Then use ISO as that final piece to get you to the right overall exposure when necessary. Understanding that raising the ISO is gonna reduce overall image quality. I'm gonna take a few more shots, but that's it for me. We'll link up all the gear that we used. We're also gonna link up Sabrina so you guys can give her a follow. Again, by the time this comes out, she's gonna be in Hawaii, so have fun in Hawaii. Check her out in Hamilton. Oh, and because this is YouTube, please like and subscribe so that I can actually keep my job and see you guys back here, same time, same place on Adorama TV. All right, peace.